Hello and you're all very welcome to Along the Line, brought to you by CK Streaming. Coming up in the show this week, we're going to be joined by Jonathan Cullen, PRO of the Tipperary County Board, to discuss GAA Congress, which took place at the weekend. And after the success of our down memory lane slot over the last few weeks, this week we're going back in time again to 2001 to remember the 20th anniversary of Tipp's All Ireland hurling success over Galway. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that joining us will be the man who made it all possible, my own personal hero growing up, the legend that is Nicky English. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, it's free and the details are along the screen of how to do it. I'm joined once again by Sean Matter. Sean, how's things?
Well, Tomas, how are you going?
Not so bad. Sean, Congress at the weekend and motion 20 was passed. I know we've been debating it for a long time now, and the sin bin is in.
Yeah, they finally decide to bring it in, but I don't know. We're all the talk here about bringing it in, but they'll have to try it and test it in a few league games or something just to see how it'll get on, because it might work with hurling as well as it does in football because it's such a faster game. But sure, they'll have to try it and test it and see.
Yeah, I suppose the cynical fouling is out from now. A few cornerbacks are going to have to perfect the art of defending again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a real challenge for them, especially now when they know that there's a sin bin on the line. It's going to be very hard for teams to go down to 14 in the last 10, 15 minutes of a game when things are going to be vital. But at the end of the day, if a team is 2 points down or 2 points up, and a lad's going through, they're just going to pull them down. They're going to have to, for the sake of a game. So, I don't know. It's going to change a lot of things, but you just have to try and test and see if it works.
Yeah, and one thing they've been calling for years, and finally get clarity, the split season was passed as well. So, I suppose club players are going to know where they stand from the start of the year on.
Yeah, thank God there'll be no more club players training in these January, February months, which is a blessing that you're not training mucky, wet fields. So, look, it gives you a chance to rest the body in as well and get ready then for a year of hurling in the sun when games will be better played and you'll be able to get out. But we'll just have to wait and see how this virus all pans out, and hopefully we'll be getting hurling now in the near future, hopefully.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting now what Jonathan says in a couple of minutes. And obviously, we've had a great reaction to the last couple of weeks. And Nicky coming up in the show later on, I'm really looking forward to him.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting a great reaction to the last week's show. There, it's a change. It's just getting these lads on. It's just a change from you can talk all recent topics and all that. But it's a change going back to the 1991 year. And again, with Nicky, he'll have some interesting stories from that could probably you've never told before about the 2001 year. So, yeah, it's going to be a good listen to now.
Yeah, well, we'll just wait and see what he has to say. Well, the GAA held their annual Congress at the weekend, and for the first time ever, every motion on the floor was carried. Joining us now along the line to discuss some of the topics to come out of Congress is PRO of the Tipperary County Board, Jonathan Cullen. Jonathan, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Tomas. I'm delighted to be here.
Jonathan, I suppose one of the main ones we'll start on, a bugbear on this show for a long time, is motion 20, the sin bin. I'm delighted myself to bring it in. I don't know what your view on it is.
Yeah, well, I think, I suppose one of the main topics of conversation after it, the main focus now, whether that's a good or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But, look at everything, I suppose, deserves a chance. And it's been given its chance now, and it's up to everybody, I suppose, maybe to make sure that it works within the way it's they're heading for a goal and they kind of want to go and they want to stay going. So maybe there won't be as much, diving or playing for frees that some people may be afraid of. But I suppose the forwards will also be aware of the fact that in hurling, while there's only one goal now, there's an awful lot of penalties that have been saved. So maybe when they'll have the momentum, and when likes of Shamie Cullen and them guys are going forward, they'll want to stay going and they want to try and get their score. So look, it's to be proven yet it's going to be a success or not, but you know, it probably deserves a chance and deserves to see how it goes over the next 12 months.
Yeah, because I suppose there for a long time, the penalty wasn't really fitting the crime. It nearly had to be cynical.
Yeah, I suppose in some situations, like if you're there with 4 or 5 minutes to go in a game, and there's some lad coming in, and there's not much in it. If you're playing in a high profile game, you'll probably take a yellow card, like, you know. So this is going to be way more punishment that if you do decide to cynically foul somebody, well, you know, you're running the risk of giving away a penalty, like. So yeah, look at it. We'll have to wait and see how it works out.
Yeah, and just another one there. I suppose a lot of questions in our own county over the last couple of days since it was brought in motion 13 with 16-team championships. A lot of people wondering if it was going to have an effect on the divisional championships.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, it has provoked a lot of talk and a lot of debate, and I suppose debate is always good. But what I would say is that, you know, this new motion, a new rule, won't be coming into effect until January 2023. So look at, I've no doubt, like, that the county board will definitely, you know, engage in a positive way with the rules advisory committee, the divisions, and the clubs, you know, so as to try and achieve a reasonable outcome that's able to be achieved within the rules, you know. And I think that, you know, in Tipperary for the last good number of years, our county championship has been down to 16 teams anyway. And, you know, as you said, there has been a lot of discussion in relation to the link. And to be fair, any discussions I have witnessed are that there has never been a mention of the link, you know, as such. And the discussion was on the motion more so than anything like that. And as I said, I have no doubt that the county board will engage in a positive way with everybody so as to try and achieve a reasonable outcome.
Yeah, I suppose what a lot of Seamus Areen clubs are kind of talking about there now, just talking to a few lads over the last couple of days, would the Seamus Areen be known as Premier Intermediate, and they could maybe represent Tipperary in the Intermediate Munster Championship, but obviously that's a long way down the line yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, that's all to be decided and all to be discussed, but I'd be of the view that it may be you'll still be your senior A and senior B perhaps, but as again, I wouldn't like to preempt any decisions that may be taken in light of the new rule. But look, it's all to be discussed and decided, and it will be discussed, and there will be you know, engagement with everybody, as I've said.
Yeah, and motion 12 as well caused a lot of debate at the split season, and looks like now the split season is finally in. It probably came in by default last year, but it's what a lot of people have been looking for a good few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and as you said, it did probably come in by default last year, but it proved to be successful, and it proved that it worked. And, you know, we were definitely would have been in favour of motion number 12. It gives everybody it gives a defined seasons now between club and inter-county. It gives I suppose players at club level, I suppose, definitely, especially, it gives them you know, they know exactly when they will be playing championship. They know that perhaps that this is to be decided as well, and there may well be leagues, and there may well be underage leagues and things like that during the first half of the year. Again, that'll all be discussed, and that'll all be probably decided by the respective CCCs. But as for the championship element of things, you know, every club player now knows when they're going to be starting their championship within reason. Obviously, if a team exits the All Ireland championships, the club championships within that county, then may be able to be started a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I suppose the day of club hurler probably training in January is over now, like, so they'll get some bit of a break there, like, because you've seen it there for a good few years where club hurlers have been training in the muck in January for one game in April, and they're not playing then again until the inter-county is finished, which is no fault of their own, no fault of the county board either.
No, but it was far from ideal, really. Like, you know, and this new the motion number 12 brings an end to that kind of thing now of having to train, as you say, for 1 or 2 matches in April, and then nothing else until the inter-county teams are exited the championship. So, as I've said already, there may well be leagues, county leagues, and that kind of thing, while without their inter-county players. And again, you know, that's probably no harm really as such if it does happen, because it gives maybe fringe players the opportunity to impress and you know, put their claim on a place within their club team as well.
Yeah, and another one that caused a lot of debate now, which I was surprised over, was Motion 7, the joint captains. That's been put by the wayside there as well. Only one man can lead them out, and only one man can receive a cup.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, to be honest with you, I think that's the right way. I mean, you either have a captain or you don't. And, you know, I think that's probably, it's just, for me anyway, from my point of view, I think it's, you know, there is only a captain. And for many, many, many years, you've always just had one captain. This is only something that really has come into play over in the recent past, that you would have joint captains. And I suppose maybe sometimes if you have group teams and amalgamations, that maybe both clubs would like to have a joint captain or that kind of thing. But look, you can have a captain, you can have a vice captain, and really all it's doing, all the motion is really doing is saying one person accepts the cup. No, there'll be loads of opportunities after that, I suppose, for photographs and things like that. So to me, I don't think it's not really a big issue.
Yeah, and Motion 23, I suppose Motion 23, it'll be grand when there's nobody in the stadium, but Mayor Fornett being banned, it's going to be hard to communicate when you get to Croke Park and 80,000 people are back in the stadium.
Yeah, it's going to make things very, very difficult. It's going to make things very, very challenging for the Mayor Fornett. As you say, obviously at the moment without crowds, you can hear a pin drop, as they say, but you have a large crowd of people in Simple Stadium or in Páirc Uí Chaoimh or Croke Park. It's going to make things awkward, but you know, it's a challenge, and it's something I'm sure nowadays the management teams in every county will be working their way around it, and I'm sure there'll be different kind of signals, and players who are on the wing forwards and wing backs and things like that. They'll be getting lots of messages to disperse throughout their team as well, you know. So yeah, it's going to make things very, very difficult.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, whatever about football, I suppose with hurling, and you usually have a hurling carrier on the far side. I suppose there'd be a lot more walkie-talkies and earpieces being used to communicate through them for the opposite side of the field, maybe.
Yeah, I'd say every means and every thing possible to try and get word and communication to players will have to be utilised now.
Yeah, and another good one that was obviously passed was Motion 27, the head injury, where you can make a temporary substitution now. Probably takes a lot of pressure off team physios and team doctors as well to try and make a split call, and whereas now they can take a look at him for 5 or 10 minutes before deciding whether to let him back in or not.
Yeah, and I think it takes the pressure actually off referees as well, because even speaking from a personal point of view, even a small bit of refereeing I've done, like, you know, you may in your heart and your soul be kind of concerned about a player, and even if you do say it to a mentor or physio that you think the player is okay, inevitably they're going to say he is. You know, even though he mightn't be 100%, but this kind of, you know, gives the opportunity then to replace that player. To the player then can obviously be assessed, and if the player is okay to return, then obviously the temporary sub will be removed from the field again, and the player can take his place back on the field.
Yeah, just before we let you go, Jonathan, we have the great Nicky English coming on after you. Big act to follow after you, but he's been talking about the 2001 All Ireland victory. Obviously, you have some great memories of that yourself.
Well, look, I mean, one thing about myself, I suppose, I actually wouldn't have a great memory of things in the past. I'm kind of somebody that kind of leaves the past in the past, but it's always nice to reminisce about things and to reminisce about victories and good games and good competitions and good championships. And obviously, from a personal point of view, I knew a good lot of the lads on the team that time and on the panel. Like in my own club, there was 3 players on the panel with Noel Morris, David Kennedy, and Paul Ormond. And you know, then I would have known some of the other lads as well from going to school with them and things like that. So it was good. It was obviously a great achievement to win the All Ireland that year. I suppose 2 great games against Wexford, and that we'll remember maybe some for 1 or 2 things that obviously dismissals and things like that. But I think Nicky English deserves great credit. And Nicky English, he was obviously known as God when he was playing, and to some people, even like myself, to be honest, I view him being God. Like, I mean, he was just an extraordinary individual, like an extraordinary hurler, an extraordinary manager. He seemed to have a way with the players, like that. They just bought into everything. It's similar to Liam Sheedy now, like that. Players just buy into the plan, like, and do everything that they can for themselves and for their colleagues on the team and for the management. And you know, Nicky is just a special person, and he deserves great credit for everything that he's done for GAA and in particular for Tipperary, and indeed his own club. Like, I remember seeing Nicky playing with Latin Cullen in football, junior football. Lochmore would have played him a number of times, and he was an absolutely fantastic footballer as well, Tomas. Like, that needs to be remembered as well, you know. And Nicky would have made any inter-county football team back in the day as well.
Yeah, I suppose Nicky there in 2001, a lot of the players, he obviously would have been their heroes, so that obviously fed into it, and they'd listen to something similar, I suppose, with Liam Sheedy now. While a lot of the players that are with Tipp at the moment wouldn't have remembered him playing, they would have remembered him from 2010. So when you have a hero like that over you, it's very easy to buy in what he's telling you.
Absolutely, like, you know, I mean, as you said, the players, the current crop would have seen him playing, and the same as the lads back then would have seen Nicky English playing. And yeah, like, I mean, hero. That's what those guys are to the players. Like, you know, the role model. They were role models when they were playing, and they're role models now. You know, I would say Liam Sheedy is definitely a role model for anybody now, and Nicky would have been a role model back when he was a manager. And you know, so as you would say, it's very, very easy to buy into something when you have people like that in charge.
Yeah, well, we're all definitely looking forward to getting Nicky's views and seeing what he has to say. Jonathan, thanks very much for coming on to the show, and we hope to be talking to you very soon, and best of luck with the year ahead.
And thank you very much, Tomas, and can I wish you the very, very best of luck with your new podcast. It's going very, very well. I note that you have an awful lot of subscribers, and you know, it's absolutely fantastic to see somebody such as yourself who is a pure GAA fanatic. I think there's no match that I have ever been at that you haven't been at as well at inter-county level, and you deserve great credit for the support you've given to Tipperary GAA. And just as I said, wish you the very best of luck, and I'm sure it'll be a huge success for you, and as well with your CK streaming as well. And I wish you the very best of luck.
Thanks very much, Danny. Well, it's time to go down memory lane again. And this week we're going back to 2001 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Tipperary's All Ireland victory over Galway. Indeed, it was a great year for the Premier County when they claimed a clean sweep of League, Munster and All Ireland victories. I'm delighted to say that joining us along the line to help us remember those great days is the man who led Tipp to those famous victories, All Ireland winning manager Nicky English. Nicky, you're very welcome to the show. Thanks a million for being with us.
Thanks, Thomas. Delighted to be chatting with you.
Yeah, Nicky, 20 years, it only feels like yesterday.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's 20 years. Yeah, my God. Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel 20 years ago. He's right. Yeah, it's. I was only thinking that the other day. Actually, it's time certainly moves on very, very quickly, and yeah, it was. Anyway, it was plenty happened that year. We have lots happening in 2020 and 2021, but 2001, of course, just after Tipp won the All Ireland, there was 9/11, so it was the start of another period of world uncertainty and fear at that time as well. Yeah, exactly. We were I remember being in on the Tuesday up near up beside Tommy Dunn's place, Gortagary actually, is where I was when I heard of 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could have been there myself. But,
yeah.
I suppose, Nicky, it was your third year in charge. You'd won the league in '99, and obviously we know what happened in the replay against Clare in the Munster semi-final. Lost the league in 2000 to Galway and managed to get to the Munster final against Cork, which unfortunately was lost, and Galway beat you in the quarter-final. But you were obviously making progress in them 2 years. But did you feel under pressure going into 2001?
I'm not sure I felt like I felt under any great pressure other than the kind of pressure I put on myself. You'd like to think that you were moving forward and that you were progressing, and but that's the way I approached it anyways. And I felt in 2000 we certainly had progressed, and I thought the Munster final was a big learning curve for everyone really. Like the occasion was huge. Tipp and Cork hadn't played for since years before that, and then it was a huge build up to it. Jimmy Barry Murphy was in charge of Cork, and our lads had won 2 matches in Munster, and we were playing Cork at home, and it just got away in us a little bit before the Munster final. Really, to be honest, there was a lot of hype in Tipp about it, and we had a lot of young players that had never been in that. Tipp hadn't been in the Munster final since '97, and at the time, there was a whole new team really who had never been, except for the likes of Declan and Johnny. Like really, the rest of them hadn't much experience. Brendan Cummins, but the rest of them really didn't have much experience of a Munster final, and there was a lot of hype about it, and ultimately Cork won easily. But I thought Tipp didn't really do themselves justice on the day. I expected we'd play better, and I thought we were capable of playing better. And then, really after that, things kind of came unstuck a little bit. We had like the quarter final was, I think, a bit of a disaster. Against Galway, really, there was the Croke Park was being redeveloped. There was a strong wind there that day. Declan Ryan was injured. So like there was plenty going against us, and I think the Munster final had left left a sting there as well. Really, we could never regenerate the momentum and energy that we had before the Munster final. I really didn't feel great going in the quarter final. I didn't have high expectations, and kind of that's how it turned out. But I think that those couple of weeks really were very formative for that team. Not just '99. They learned. They were young and they learned a lot in '99. But 2000 they learned more. They expected more from themselves, and ultimately were disappointed both in the Munster final and in Croke Park against Galway.
Yeah, I suppose the first time that you were starting to build something special in 2001 was the draw in the league against Kilkenny. Now, as you know, Tipp teams before that and even since then have gone to Nolan Park and to be flying, but they've come home with their tail between their legs. So getting a draw that day was a huge thing. Then.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was I actually don't know when. I mean, 2001 was the year of the foot and mouth as well. So the league was postponed, and I always remember saying to Jack Bergen at one stage, you know, that how hard luck was that. Just as we had kind of learned all the lessons of the previous 2 years, and the team was improving. That now there was no hurling, and would there be any hurling? You know, this is kind of February, March time. Like, where would we end up? The whole thing was postponed. Much like now, and a lot of uncertainty. And so I think, just to go back a step, I think the resumption of the league, I think, was against Waterford in Nina, actually. And I think Tipp played quite well on the day, and, you know, got a victory. The series of the games now, I'm not fully sure of, but then we went to Kilkenny for sure, and that was a game we targeted really, just to, you know, Kilkenny they were All Ireland champions in 2000, and so, you know, you were going to test yourself in Kilkenny against the All Ireland champions just to see. And we had, you know, like the younger players had come in, Owen Kelly and Larry, and they were both going to play, and yeah, we got out of it in a low scoring draw, really. Quite a bad weather, really, I think, from memory. And, you know, Tipp, I thought they did very well on the day to get the draw, and I think it all built a little bit more confidence and more know-how for the team, and you know, ultimately, you know, as the year panned out, they were involved in a succession of very close games. So that was just another, you know, that was nearly one of the start of them, and that kind of built a bit of know-how and confidence on top of the learning and the formation that had gone in over the previous 2 years. And, you know, their training had changed a little bit there. Like in the previous 2 years, we trained awfully hard altogether, with more emphasis on stamina, really. Whereas in 2001, Jim Kilty came in, and it was more an emphasis on speed in terms of the physical and training, and that really worked. But it really worked based on the massive base of endurance and stamina that had been built up in 99 and 2000, because we trained harder than anyone, really.
Yeah, I suppose moving on, like the league final, it was 4 weeks out before you were due to play Clare again. A lot of talk before it, and neither team would want to reveal their hand. But losing could have been a huge psychological blow as well.
Yeah, do you know what? We never really distinguish between the league and the championship. You know, I think that you know, coming through it, you'd have a lot of old wives' tales, older players at the times telling younger players, look, the championship is different. But really, it's not. You know, if you're within 3 or 4 weeks, unless you have extra players to bring on, the players that are going to go out and play, they're going to play as they're going to play in 3 or 4 weeks' time. And that was the way I always viewed it, really. So I would have thought it was important to win. You know, we still had a little bit in the tank, I think, but we needed to see how the younger players, you know, that was probably a final was a big day for them. Clare were a big team at the time, and, you know, like we had a couple of new players onto it from the previous year, and so like every bit of experience for us was important. And again, it was going to be, as it turned out, we knew there wouldn't be much in it anytime we were going to play Clare, and again, on the day it proved that there wasn't much in it, and but importantly, Tipp got on the right side of it, and you know, that's all. That was building again more experience, and building again more. You know, we were coming out the right side of the or at least level on the close matches, and that really proved. I think that experience proved more and more important as the year went on.
like I suppose you managed to win that game by 5 points, but Brendan Cummins pulled off 4 incredible saves and got man of the match. So it definitely, it definitely gave you something to work with. Like,
yeah, I wouldn't have remembered that there was actually. I wouldn't have thought there was fighting. You know, from this level out, I wouldn't have remembered there was 5 points in it. I thought it was closer, actually, to be honest with you. But I always remember Brendan was outstanding on the day, and sure, that's the reason why there was 5 points in it at the end, I suppose. You know, and he was again like that. The defense was getting a bit more, was getting more and more more, I suppose, steady really in terms of personnel. You know, you had Paul Ormond was in there with Phil Maher and then David Kennedy, and of course then coming up to the Munster Championship against Clare, David Kennedy got injured, and that was, you know, we thought that was going to be a huge loss at the time, but you know, that was so that was kind of the build up going into it. Was I felt he was going to be a huge loss because he had become a very important player for Tipp.
Yeah, just touching on David Kennedy, how good a player was David Kennedy? He probably doesn't get the credit he deserves, and like he's still playing today for his club.
Yeah, I saw him there and goes. I would always judge players on basically if I judge a defender even today by whether I'd like to mark him or not. And one of the in that Tipp backline at the time, there was a number of players that I wouldn't like to mark, but David Kennedy would be number one. I just hate to mark him. You'd never get the end of him, you know. And maybe, you know, his skill, etc., wasn't, you know, it mightn't have been at the level of the Mick Roaches, you know, or the previous, you know, in centre back terms. But like the way he could cover the centre, the way he could block it up, the way he could face the puck out, his power, his never say die attitude. You know, that was absolutely vital for me because, you know, my formation, I suppose I had seen maybe in Babs' time, Babs would always be looking for a Mick Roach lookalike or a Mick Roach replica, and typically we were better as a team when we had Bobby Ryan at centre back, who, you know, I hope you're listening, Bobby. He wouldn't be. You could never mistake him for Mick Roach anyway. That's for sure. But that's the kind of I think it's and still to this day it's changed a little bit now with the way centre backs and centre forwards play. But like when the game was more 15-on-15, you know, someone if you have to pick between someone who can really hurl or someone who can really block the centre, I'd be going with someone who could really block the centre, and David Kennedy could do that better than most.
Yeah, and moving on to the first round there, I remember going down that day. It was a baking hot day down in Cork. But what was the mood like going into that game?
Well, I'll be honest. I was pretty confident that if we could win the match against Clare, that we had a real chance of winning the All Ireland. I felt that was the key game, really. You know, Clare were really, that was their really their last hurrah. They were really up for that. We knew that. We saw them in the league final. They were quite impressive. And, you know, it was one-off game, like you were gone if you lost it. We knew there'd be very little in it. We were short David Kennedy, as I said. So we knew that, well, I knew that it would really go down to the wire, and you know, that we, you know, the principles and of going to the ball and taking responsibility, not being afraid to make mistakes, but not doing stupid things either, would really come down to it in the end. And a free here or a free there would make a huge difference. And players had to be disciplined. And, you know, like we had, like Owen and Larry were in their first day out. You know, I always remember that photo of Declan Ryan at Mick Galway and Rog and Peter Stringer around the same time before the game. And, you know, I always remember before the match, or maybe just as the match started, Mark O'Leary, you know, I felt being plaguarded by a Clare player right in front of me. And it was clear that Clare were rightly up for it. You know, we saw Owen Kelly then getting hit one after another. You know, close enough to the ball, I suppose, by Shawnee McMahon and Ollie Baker. But they were really testing the mettle of the Tipp lads, and if there was any kink there at all, it would have been found. But you know, the lads, in fairness, they were up for it, and Owen, just after that event, you know, he hit a free from the far side, a difficult one for a young fella, and his first day out, his first free in the Munster Championship, and he nailed that. And Mark O'Leary went on to have a really good game, and ultimately margins were fairly tight in the end. Really, there wasn't much in it. I'd say we got maybe an odd free or two easily there in the end, and we didn't concede. We were up for it, and it was a fantastic victory. Really, that was, and that set us on the road again. It was a very tight victory, but you know, the lads had come through the league final, now come through that match, and Clare were really, you know, they were one of the big contenders, and whoever was going to get through that match, as I said previously, I felt was going to have a huge chance of winning the All Ireland, and that was felt really great after that match, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember looking at the match the following day. Actually, one thing that actually sticks with me. Said just before the parade, Brendan Cummins was asked to change his jersey because of the clash with the Clare jerseys. And Cyril Farrell commented straight away, I have it here in front of me, he says, there's no way Nicky's going to stand for this. And we're going to see him start playing mind games by looking for Davy Fitz to jersey to be changed. And immediately after the parade, Dickie Murphy told Davy to change the jersey, and he was non-best pleased over it. And it kind of got to to actually look for the jersey to be changed.
We were expecting it, really. We were going to do that, yeah. I actually didn't remember Brendan being asked to change, but I knew that we were planning to get Davy to change, yeah.
I actually didn't realise that at the time. I actually had to look back at the programme of the Munster final, that the team photo, he was wearing the gold jersey, but maybe that was mind games before the match. But like you were just saying about Owen there, like obviously Clare were digging it into Tipp from the start, and you could see from the throw-in as well that Colin Lynch pulled across Tommy, and Tommy gave him a fair one back now. It kind of showed that Tipp weren't going to be pushed around. But Eamon Corcoran gave Owen Kelly a lovely ball just after that, and he put it over the bar. Like, for a young lad to get a ball like that and put it over, it obviously settled him into the game straight away.
Yeah, Thomas, but he was, I mean, Owen had a lot of experience, do you know what I mean? Even coming in that year, you know, he had come in 2000, and he'd scored a point in that quarter final actually as a young lad. But he's just you know, he was well ready for it. Owen, you know, I probably Larry, I'd have had more worries about Larry, how ready he was for it rather than Owen, because Larry didn't have anything like, he had no experience whatsoever, really. He was just really pitched into the deep end. But, you know, Owen had it all, really. He had the power as well, even at that stage. You know, when you look back, he looks, you know, he looks small, but he doesn't look as he was pretty well developed all through, and he had a good head for the game. He had been, you know, taking the frees for Kieran's, for Tipp minors. You know, he knew what it was all about, really, and you know, he as he proved to go on afterwards to be one of the greatest players of all time, really, for Tipperary, you know.
Yeah, because like a lot of them do talk about Shawnee McMahon and Ollie Baker. That incident, I suppose, is one of the most famous incidents. But at the end, right, actually nearly got hit for a goal there halfway through the first half, and it fell to Owen, and Owen pulled on it, and it went wide. And 3 or 4 Clare lads came out, hitting him shoulders. Like, obviously, we know who Owen Kelly was from 12 or 13 years of age, because you wouldn't see too many under 12s that made the under 14 team back then, the county under 14 team.
Yeah.
So I think Clare were wrong probably targeting him that day. Surely they would have known more about him coming in, and that he was going to be able to mind himself.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that might have been just the way at the time. You know what I mean? It wasn't just Owen Kelly. I'd say anyone that was going to miss a goal probably was going to get a bit of targeting. Really, that was just kind of there was a certain amount of that went on at the time. Really, was it wasn't pretty in hurling at the time, you know, and it wasn't the nicest, but I don't think it was just Owen, but at the same time, I suppose he was young, and you know they were a very experienced team, and you know, sure, it's natural to say, you know, we'll test out these new kids on the block, and you know, ultimately, and in fairness, they really did. You know, that was their, you know, someone like Shawnee McMahon was one of the finest players you'll ever see. Jamesy O'Connor, like that was their final. You know, I know they got to an All Ireland final afterwards, but like that was, you know, they really had prepared well in 2001, and they were really up for that day. So, you know, that was a huge game, and it was a big loss for them.
Yeah, like things were tight in the first half. It was kind of point for point. But Colin Lynch nearly sneaked in for a goal then just before half time, and obviously that would have been a big boost to him if he had to score it.
Yeah, I just like it was nearly, it was all the time. You know, the key incidents for me really were, you know, I felt all through. I can remember that incident where he didn't score, and you know, into the second half, I just felt we were doing okay, I thought, and then we had Johnny Lahey, who was playing really well in training, and we had him to come in, and I felt that we just had that little bit of an edge, and that, you know, that Johnny would bring it home, really, that he was going to be the key, and so I was confident enough. And then when Johnny went on and he was coming back out to us on gone for the season, effectively, we knew straight away. I actually saw him going down. I said, that's over anyway. And so all in a minute, really, what I thought was our trump card was played and had completely blown up in our face. And I felt that the tide had turned a bit actually at that stage. And so that was so, you know, to come from there and get back and win the game again, you know, it was a serious achievement for the lads that day. They all really had to knuckle in. They all had to know what they were doing. They all had to, you know, play their part that day, and ultimately just barely crawl over the line, really, but it was enough.
Yeah, because Clare got the first 2 points of the second half and went 2 points up. And then, obviously, I think James O'Connor got the point, and then Johnny Lahey was coming in, and the Tipp crowd erupted. Like, you wouldn't see the opposition supporters erupting after Clare getting the point, but we all knew Lahey was coming. But was he maybe too psyched up coming in? Because that ball he went for, like with Brian Lohan, he would never have won it. Yeah,
well, maybe, I suppose that's the chance you take. You know what I mean? Like if you try to, that time it was very new to have players who were really playing well in training, and Johnny had just come very right there in the couple of weeks before the training, and he was really flying it, and just to hold him off, you know, I had famously backfired on me in 1999 with Declan Ryan when I thought we'd hold him out of the starting 15 for the draw or for the replay and just let the thing settle down a little bit. But I always remember putting on Declan after 25 minutes, and I was looking at him, he was looking at me, and I said, there's no chance here anyway. He and I knew that the whole thing had blown up, and ultimately it was going to be my fault, really, not his. So yeah, maybe as regards going back to Johnny, maybe he was just too psyched up because he knew he was going really well, and he was going to make the impact, and he maybe went for a ball that maybe he mightn't go for if he was just more relaxed and had started the game. So it's very possible, Thomas Street. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I suppose David Kennedy came on not long after that, and Paul Kelly went to centre field, and it was actually him that put Tipp in front at that stage. And Declan Ryan and Brian O'Mara got 2 quick points after us. But Clare didn't. They didn't throw in the towel, and they came back to within a point. And Owen put Tipp 2 points up again, and that was with 10 minutes to go. We didn't score again after that. But I remember all around the stadium, there was a fear of losing among the Tipp fans, and that could have seeped into the, looking back at it, maybe that could have seeped into the players on the field. Like.
I really don't know, Thomas. I mean, to be honest, I don't really remember kind of a fear of losing. Really, to be honest, I just thought there wasn't much between the teams. They were very closely matched, and you know, everything was really fought for, and every point that you were going to get had to be eked out. Like we knew really that Clare did score about 18, 19 points at the time. That was kind of their benchmark really. And, you know, to win, you were going to have to score a little bit more than that. And if you got a couple of goals, you were going to win. You were certainly going to be well on the way, but it was very hard to score goals against them. You know, they had an outstanding defense, and Davey was an outstanding goalkeeper as well. So like, it was really tight. So every score, you know, getting down to that last 15, 20 minutes meant a whole lot. And then you really had to hold out, and you had to defend without conceding frees really. And that was kind of the key to it. You had to battle for every ball. And I don't remember a fear of losing. I really don't think I had. I certainly hadn't anyway. I never heard the players saying that afterwards. But I'd say it was just the enormity of the game, and that was, I mean, in terms of atmosphere and in terms of ferocity of challenge and ferocity of effort, like that was one of the most savage Tipp games I ever saw. Really, you know, that was a, you know, that was backs to the wall job. Any way you want to describe it, it was a ferocious victory, really, that one.
Yeah, and I suppose the Munster final then 4 weeks later against Limerick, like they were obviously going to be on a high coming in after beating Cork and Water.
Yeah, we did, and we knew we didn't underestimate them. Now we knew they were going to be tough, and actually, as you were talking about a warm day, I actually think that was the warmest day I was ever at a match. Was the Munster final between Tipperary and Limerick that day. It was incredibly warm, and you know, Limerick had plenty of experience, and they still had Kieran Carey, they still had Mark Foley. You know, they had plenty of players around the place that were capable of causing trouble. Brian Begley at the time. So, and you know what, Tipp hadn't a whole lot to spare at the end, and no more than we ever have against Limerick. Really, Limerick are, you know, I'm from very close to the Limerick border, and really we never really get it easy against Limerick over the years, and that was another occasion where we didn't. You know, we at times we looked like we were going to be able to get away from them, but they were always able to claw us back and hang in there. And you know, it might have been 2 points margin at the end, but it was tight right to the finish, and you know, there was a couple of frees in for Limerick there finishing up that, you know, could have, you know, we were defending, and it could have gone anywhere. And I'd say more so than in the Clare match, in the last few minutes of that, there was certainly a bit of a fear of losing, even though there was a backdoor at that stage. If you lost the Munster final, you were going to progress. But really, I think, and I'm pretty sure the players thought as well, that to continue the progression from 2000, if you could call 2000 a progression, getting to the Munster final, really to progress, you had to win the Munster final in 2001, and you weren't going to get a better chance. You were in front. You are at least as good, if not better, than Limerick, probably better. So, you know, you actually had to confirm superiority there over that Limerick team. We played them in league matches. We thought we could beat them, and ultimately we saw it out in the end, but not by you know, it wasn't very comfortable really. Yeah,
because as you said, it was a baking day, but you started on fire that day. You had 5 different scores in the first 7 minutes. Anything that you were getting, you were scoring. I think it could have been 25 minutes before Tipp hit a wide. And like you went 6-2 up, and Ollie Moore started coming into it then. He scored a super point that got the crowd going. And then from the puck out, Kieran Carey wins it and launches a long ball, and the confusion in the full back line, and Seanie O'Connor nips in for a goal.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that was kind of typical all through the match, really. You know, if we did get a little bit of a lead, Limerick were always able to just cause a bit of trouble and get back. One of the highlights for me actually in that game was a point scored by Kieran Carey for Limerick in when they were, you know, threatening to come back near the end. You know, and there was several Tipp fellas around him, including Paul Ormond, who was, you know, a really good defender, and Eamon Corcoran at the time, and he managed to beat both of them, and from the right hand side of the goals, put the ball over the bar from about 30 yards out, and it was just, you know, Limerick are a momentum team really, or they have been in years gone by, and they at certain times they had the momentum there, and they had a huge crowd there that day as well, and but that was an occasion when Kieran Carey got that point that I was a bit worried. All right.
I was actually reading an old article during the week and on the match, and I came across Limerick's Live 95. They actually couldn't believe Eamon Cregan was starting Shawnee O'Connor, that a young 20-year-old making his debut in a Munster final. And they didn't seem to know much about him in Limerick. But did you know much about him?
No, not really. No, I certainly didn't. Anyway, maybe the players did, but he scored. He did get on the goal at the end of it in the first half there for sure. No, really, we didn't know an awful lot about him, to be honest.
Yeah, because just after the goal, Brian O'Mara took the bull by the horns, and the two mazy runs, setting up Declan Ryan and Larry for the 2 goals.
Yeah, Brian O'Mara was having a brilliant year in 2001. Like, Brian had plenty of experience, really. I played with Brian back in 95, 96, and he really was coming into his own by the time 2001 came. He was very experienced, very unselfish player. He was an outstanding athlete, Brian, and he really was playing brilliant hurling in 2001 and 2002. Actually, I'd say, those 2 years really, he was very much at his prime, and he had a brilliant match in the Munster final. I'd say, if I'm not mistaken, I'd say Brian O'Mara was man of the match in the Munster final in 2001. I think he was outstanding, and he was marking Mark Foley, who was one of the Limerick's key men at the time as well. He had played well in the previous games to get him to the Munster final, and not alone Brian O'Mara had to not alone just do his own job, but he had to keep Mark Foley quiet as well.
Yeah, because you'd better start to the second half that day. Paul Kelly, Mark O'Leary getting 2 or 3 points between them, and you were obviously a few points ahead. But as you said, Mark Foley scored 2 unbelievable points, I'd say, right down in front of you.
Yeah, I remember unbelievable strikes at the ball, actually. Yeah,
and obviously, Kieran Carey, that point that you were talking about, and Shawnee O'Connor again ends up, a ball comes down off the post, and he ends up putting it over the bar. Nothing could go wrong for him that day. But as you said, 3 minutes to go at that stage and back level. And it was actually the subs that came good then. Eugene O'Neill and Liam Cahill set up Brian O'Mara for the point to put you in front.
Yeah.
And then John O'Brien, a young John O'Brien at that stage as well, getting the one to seal.
John reckons when I brought him on that day that I ruined his career forever. My advice to him going on the field was, don't get blocked down, John. That was the only advice he got. He said that always affected his confidence ever afterwards. He blamed me. But it was a great point by Jono. Yeah, he was. But Jono again, he was only Jono was only 18/19 at the time, and he was. He played brilliantly for Tumivara in county finals, and Jono's a great character, and he had, even at that stage, he had, some maturity beyond his years, really, you'd have to say, and he was that was a very vital score when he went on, and he was mad to get on, and he did his business for sure. Yeah,
because just looking at him in later years, do you think John O'Brien was underrated for Tipp?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think John O'Brien had. I think John. I think he struggled with injury no more, and also I think Paddy was a super player as well, and Paddy definitely got injury, really completely undermined Paddy really, and I think John, he had the accident there, early in his career or early-ish in his career, and had a few injuries before that. But like John O'Brien was an absolutely outstanding player. He was very physically strong, great to win the ball in the air, great attitude, great skill, and he had great vision and intelligence and brain as well. Yeah. I wouldn't underrate him or underestimate him, but I'd say possibly. But I think maybe injury over time, caused maybe an underrating of him. But he was an outstanding player.
Well, I know just by talking to players that have played with him, they can vouch for how good he actually was. But 5 weeks to the All Ireland semi-final against Wexford, Nicky, and you were lying in the low grass, but there's one thing I hate about when Tipp were lying in the low grass or in the long grass. The rumour mill tends to go into overdrive, and 99.99% of it never seems to be true. And there's talks of there's going to be a number of changes to the team, and then you obviously named the same 15 from the Munster final. But then just as the ball is about to be thrown in, there's 4 positional changes.
Yeah, well, do you know what? I don't know the 4 position changes. I don't remember, but there was one key one really.
John Carroll is centre forward, and
where John was
switched wings. Paul Kelly went back wing back, and Eddie Enright centre field.
Yeah, well, the key one really, the one that was really necessary to cause all the rest was John Carroll to go to centre forward. Like John had been struggling a little bit at wing back. He was an all-star the previous year, but that really wasn't the reason. We just needed a bit more thrust up front. And actually, one of the most enjoyable things for me of the whole year was when the teams were lining out for that semi-final. John Carroll went to centre forward, but as he went to centre forward, Liam Dunn, who was playing centre back for Wexford, thought he must be at the wrong end of the field, and he went to walk up to the other end, and I thought that was pretty neat, to be honest.
Yeah, because like sitting in the Cusick stand, it took us a few minutes to figure out who was playing where, and like once again, Tipp started well, so them changes obviously upset Wexford.
I don't know, to be honest. Like John Carroll's move, certainly they weren't expecting that anyway, that's for sure. And Paul Kelly, we wanted to get him to wing back, really. That's where we felt he was going to give us most. And he had done so, really. He's like, Paul is, again, maybe an underestimated or not totally valued player, really. But Paul Kelly is one of the finest players and wing backs that I ever saw playing the game. His touch and his skill, it was just outstanding, really. When he'd come up along the left hand side from wing back, I mean, he was regularly scoring 3 and 4 points a game, and just a joy to watch, really. Great in the air and a beautiful striker of the ball. So he was getting into a more natural position at wing back, and Eddie Enright then was really able to do. Eddie Enright was doing a job where, like, at centre forward, he was able to do a certain job, but at midfield, Eddie Enright was doing like a defensive midfielder's job that has only become really popular in more recent years. Eddie was really ahead of his time. He was a link man, really, and again, another very much underestimated player, but a hugely important player within that team. He was able to get a very good touch under any kind of circumstances, and always and ever the quality of his delivery to the forwards was outstanding. So, like, they were all key players in their own way, and John Carroll going to centre forward, I felt was going to give us a lot, and the rest of the players, they were going to benefit as well, really, because Eddie was going to be, he was a better midfielder than he was a centre forward in my view, and Paul was going to slot back, wing back, no problem, but John was the one really that was the unexpected one, and is the one that caused the trouble, because and ultimately in both games against Wexford he was able to career through the middle, give him where at wing back he was an all-star the previous year, he had something to live up to, he had a reputation to protect, and he wasn't as swashbuckling as he was in 2000, and the best John Carroll at his best was a very swashbuckling player. You need him to be playing like that, not to be playing with some kind of, I won't call it fear, he couldn't do that, but to be trying to protect the previous reputation, which is possibly why he wasn't as effective in 2001 at wing back as he was in 2000. But when he went up centre forward, he was outstanding, absolutely amazing from there.
Yeah, because like as I said, you did start very well. But Damien Fitzhenry put off two great saves, one from Larry and one from Declan Ryan. And then John got the goal. I remember he whipped on it on the ground after a long ball in. And John nearly got another goal then after that. Like, he could have been out of sight at half time that day because you were playing unbelievable hurling as well.
Yeah, I think Tipp played very well. For a long time that day, I think Tipperary played really well. Yeah, the individual moments that you described there, unfortunately, I really don't remember. I can remember John Carroll's goal, and I can remember John Carroll's. I think he had a kick one blocked shortly after it, and I thought, I did think we should have been out of sight, but the problem is when you should be out of sight, you need to be out of sight. You know what I mean? If you're not, you leave a lifeline, and that's as it turned out actually. And for a finish, I was on my knees praying for the final whistle. I just thought, if we can get out of here, because we kind of ran out of steam. We didn't have match practice. The 5 to 6 week gap started to catch up on us. The expectation of being Munster champions, as you called it, the long grass earlier on, all started to catch up when we were winning. And the next thing, when it turned unbelievably. And I think it turned from Larry O'Gorman actually was as I remember, scoring the goals, finishing up. But I really, we were out of gas. If there had to be much more time or more attacks, we were gone, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, because as you said, for maybe 45, 50 minutes, because you were unbelievable, because even in the second half, Tommy Dunn, Mark O'Leary were popping over points for sport, and Declan Ryan was spraying balls around, bringing others into the game. But Wexford bring on Martin Story then, and from the stands, it looked like an act of desperation. I think Martin Story was maybe 36, 37 at the time. But obviously, the impact straight away. Larry O'Gorman got the first goal straight away, and Rory McCarthy within 2 minutes. But you seem to weather that storm, and I think he went 5 points up again. And like the third goal, Darren Stampoli dropped it in. It was kind of hitting hope, like something you'd see in a school ground, really. And the ball just dropped, and Larry O'Gorman gets the flick to us. And like as you said, getting out of there was a huge thing.
I was just praying for the final whistle, really. Because I thought we were better than Wexford, but just in the circumstances, the way they had turned, I said, if we'd be lucky to get out of here. And I always remember we went, after the match, we went back to, because we knew the replay was going to be on the following Saturday night. So normally we'd have a bit of a night out after the matches. That was just the way it was that time. I don't know whether it was now, but we would have been on the train. Well, no, probably would have been on a I'd say we might have been on the train, I don't know, or a bus, but we went back to Jury's Hotel and we actually did the recovery in the swimming pool, etc. And we had a bit of a meeting. And I actually thought that was nearly the winning. I remember saying to the players that evening that I think that might be the winning of the All Ireland for us. That, you know, we've overcome that 5 or 6 week gap, which I felt was probably always going to be a bit of a problem. Going in as Munster champions, which we've seen since, sure, has been an absolute death knell for Munster champions. Most of them have been beaten over the last 20 years. And but I just felt that we got out of jail and we were better than Wexford, and that we now, not alone would we'd have an extra match in Croke Park. You know, our previous match in Croke Park, the only experience we had there was the loss in the quarter final against Galway the previous year. So now I felt, well, we were going to get an additional bonus as well. And we had played fairly well against Wexford up to a point, and it was a close game, and we hadn't lost, which was kind of keeping the momentum and the pattern of 2001 going. And I just felt that we were going to get another match in Croke Park. It was going to be more experience for our players, and I was fairly confident that we could beat Wexford. That I was confident that we could improve, that we'd finish stronger than we did in that match that day. And I remember saying that to the players that evening in juries in Bosbridge, that was, I think, maybe the crowning of us. And I think maybe that was ultimately, it was huge, very important for that team that obviously we were beaten, we were gone, but just to get the extra game was big.
Yeah, the replay the following Saturday, it was a horrible day. Last rain all day. I think it took 9 minutes or something for the first score. Once again, John Carroll getting in for the goal. And Wexford stayed in touch, like tipping away points. There were 2 or 3 points in it. And everything changes 3 or 4 minutes before half time.
Yeah, I suppose that was when Brian O'Mara and Liam Dunn was sent off. Was it Thomas? Yeah. They were definitely sent off before half time, because I remember we had kind of have to reorganize at half time. I really didn't see it, but you know, sure, as we know now, it was ridiculous sending off, really, particularly on Brian O'Mara. I
was actually reading an interview with both Brian O'Mara and Pat Horn, who refereed the game before Tipp played Wexford in 19. And Pat Horn actually said that he spoke with his linesman, but his 2 umpires at Hill 16N said to him at half time, "Why didn't you come to us?" And when he went home that night, he looked at the video and he realised what he was after doing. That if he had to realise that they were only chapping each other, 2 yellows would have sufficed.
Yeah, it was. You know, I was very hard on Brian, actually, to be honest. You know, ultimately to miss out the winning of the All Ireland, I really, I mean, if there was any downer on the year, that certainly was it. You know, because he had been playing superbly in all the matches. I mean, there's no doubt he just didn't deserve to be sent off, and we ultimately appealed. But I always remember we had a training session after that match and before the appeal, and you know, really had to kind of park it off in a corner, saying, okay, the appeal is going to be this, but you know, if it works, it works, but we have to be prepared now that it's not going to work, and that the whole appeal process doesn't become more important than the actual playing of the match. And Brian O'Mara was really outstanding in that particular chat outside in the field in Thurles. And he was saying, well, look, we have to win the All Ireland anyway. If I'm playing, great. If I'm not, you know, it's terrible, but we still have to win the All Ireland. And I'll never forget, like, it was, I mean, you know, it was, at the time, I suppose we were hoping the appeal might work, but you know, as proved afterwards, it was a total waste of time, really. You know, the die was cast, and Brian ultimately was to miss out very unfairly.
Yeah, because Pat Horn, he said that, like, if it happened now, Croke Park would ask him to look back at the video and if he's happy with his decision, but there was none of that then. And if he was asked, he would have said that it was 2 yellows. But Brian O'Meara actually said had a cracked rib, and when Liam Dunn gave him a bit of a dig, the pain shot up through him. He said that's why kind of one of the reasons he.
Yeah, but to be honest, when you see what he did, he didn't do a lot really. Brian was only he was standing his ground really, is all he was. You know what I mean? So, and you know, no more than anyone really. I'm pretty sure Brian wasn't the instigator anyway. That's for sure.
Yeah, maybe. Like if you look at it, Liam Dunn, I think had been sent off the 3 previous years on each given day when Wexford were knocked out of the championship. So his reputation mightn't have helped either one of the players.
Yeah, well, it's possible, but you look, it's at the end of the day, it was a mistake really, and acknowledged as a mistake, particularly in Brian's case anyway. And it was just a pity really that Brian didn't fully participate in the All Ireland final, like because he was in the whole of his health really. As say like 2001 and 2002, there was no finer specimen and no fitter wing forward in Ireland than Brian O'Meara. No, absolutely not. And he was a huge part of the team. And you know, it was a big worry going into the final to be without him really, because you know at the time you had to win your own ball in the half forward line. And Brian O'Meara was one of the best men we had to do that.
Yeah, he probably would have ran Tommy close for hurler of the year that year.
Oh, he'd been right up there, yeah. Because he was outstanding in all the matches, you know, and he was like our attitude with half forwards that time was they had to work themselves into the ground. And, you know, if you were able to last as a wing forward, really, that if you were doing what you were supposed to be doing for 60 minutes, you shouldn't be able to last the last couple of minutes. The last 10, and you know we had the likes of either Eugene or Paddy O'Brien or John O'Brien. You know, we had a few subs to come on in the forward line as well at that stage. You know, so that was kind of the modus operandi, let's say. But Brian was a key man. He was one of the top 3 or 4 players on the team. Yeah. And
yeah, because the funny thing about it is when Mitch Jordan was sent off a couple of minutes later. Like he pulled on Paul Armand from behind, and it was only a second yellow, and it was just very hard to figure out at the time why that was a second yellow, and Brian and Liam Dunn were given straight reds.
Yeah, you know what? I don't remember Mitch Jordan's first yellow, but I think that might have been harmless enough. I think at the time as well. Do you know what I mean? I don't really. I have a feeling that I think Mitch Jordan's second one was fairly clear cut, all right, but I think his first yellow might have been harmless enough as well now. But again, I haven't watched the match. I don't think I've ever watched that match since, to be honest. My main memory of it is the rain that was falling incessantly during the match was horrendous. Yeah. And at half time, the job to reorganize ourselves, because there was huge kind of the match was kind of nondescript really up to the sending off of Brian O'Meara and Liam Dunn, and then shortly after you had Mitch Jordan being sent off, and then we had to go into the dressing room at half time. Now I don't remember the score, but I think we were ahead, but now we were numerically going to be ahead, and we had to make sure that we were going to use the extra man. And I was very, very conscious that I had seen numerous teams over many years misuse the extra man, where players would kind of just 2 players were trying to do the one job, and where 2 in the full forward line would effectively be able to be 3, because the 3 where we were going to be left with 3 were going to be they were going to be colliding with one another in the sense that they were going to be interfering with not do their own jobs or keep their own positions. So at half time, where I was really conscious that Paul Kelly for sure was going to be one of our free men, because he was, you know, a beautiful hurler in very bad conditions. He was going to get on the ball, but I had to, you know, to impress on him that he must stay on the left wing or the left cornerback. I think we might have put him on because Paul Armand, he was detailed to mark someone, I'm pretty sure. But Paul Kelly had basically all the left-hand side. And the key to it, in my view, was that he shouldn't be pulled out of that corner. He just had to wait there. If we could get enough pressure on the Wexford backs up there, they weren't going to be able to, they wouldn't have had time to think that they were short 2 players down in that wing. and that ultimately Paul had picked up a lot of ball, and he played the role perfectly. Really, he stayed on that kind of left hand side of the field, and he picked up an ocean of ball in the second half. And Eugene O'Neill came on and definitely scored one. I'd say he might have scored 2 goals actually. Eugene, he finished really well.
Paul actually set up both goals. Like as you said, Paul Kelly, he was unbelievable as a spare man. He's probably the best spare man I've ever seen. And
on that particular day, now of course, like it was 14-13, which I've never seen since. Really, I don't think. So it was a different game completely, but the principles at 15-14 for me are the same. The guy, you must keep your position as opposed to just having 2 players on 1 player. You know what I mean? Where they're not. They just become, one of them becomes redundant. Whereas if they're all in their own, Paul Kelly became he was a lone ranger really on the left hand side of the fence for Tipp, and like it worked a treat really. He got on an amount of ball, and like he had the intelligence and the wherewithal to give good ball. Then Paul, he always knew what he was doing with the ball. He was he could score, but he could put it in your pocket really as well when he looked to pass the ball, and which he did, and he was outstanding on that day.
Yeah, as you said, like at the end of the game, all we wanted to do was get in out of the West. Horrible day, but 3 weeks to prepare for the final. Like obviously, your preparation is a lot different as a manager than what it was as a player.
Yeah, well, first of all, that was the semi-final was on the Sunday. Then Kilkenny between Kilkenny and Galway, and Kilkenny were champions, and so I went to the match in Croke Park, and it was a surprise that Galway won it, but not that much of a surprise. But the surprise really for me was that the reporting of the match was how Galway were able to bully Kilkenny so easily and how physically they were outstanding. And I didn't really see it the same way, to be honest. I thought Kilkenny were a bit, they were like champion. They played like champions on the day, where, like we don't expect to be hit. We don't expect to be put out of our comfort zone. And they just weren't able to deal with that really. They could have arguably been better than Galway on the day, but Galway just threw them out of their rhythm and their balance, much like Kilkenny threw Limerick out of their balance in 2019. I mean, it's hard to imagine how Kilkenny could beat Limerick in 2019 when you see the relative merits of the teams. But it happened, and Limerick were champions, and when they got the few physical shots early on in the match from the likes of Brown and Donnelly, it just knocked them out of their comfort zone. And that was my impression of the semi-final between Kilkenny and Galway in 2001 on the day. And then when I read the papers on Sunday and listened to other people about the match, and they said how great Galway were, how physical they were, how difficult it would be for Tipperary, I was kind of wondering to myself, what was the was I seeing the same match, to be honest? So I had to look at it a couple of times again, and the first, as going back to your question, the preparation for the All Ireland is very much different. But the first bit of it was about Brian O'Meara. Actually, we kind of had to deal with that early on, and we had to face that at the first training session, and then we had the appeal. I'm not sure when the appeal was, whether it was probably the middle of the second week. But we were, we prepared as we'd normally prepare for any match really at the time. Brian O'Meara was really our only issue. In some regards, it probably made a little bit of the selection for the match a little bit easier. Larry, Eugene O'Neill had come in and played very, very well against Wexford, scored 2 goals. Larry had been going through a little bit of he was young. He hadn't been as good against Wexford as he was in the earlier games and in the Munster final. So he was probably under a bit of pressure. And I know since then he's asked me if Brian O'Mara was available, would he be in playing? And I said, Larry, I don't know, because I never had to get to that decision, or we never had to get to that decision. But it would have been a decision we'd have had to get to. But as it turned out, we didn't have to get to that decision. And Larry was able to come out week forward, which kind of loosened him up a bit as well. He didn't feel he had to score as much. His role was now more to do a Brian O'Mara type operation and either try and win the ball or not lose it in the air anyway, and then track back and block and hoop, which he did outstandingly well on the day. And Eugene did his job as well in the full line. But yeah, the preparation was quite smooth, really. I was very conscious of the circus around the 2000 Munster final, and also kind of the circus around our first All Ireland in 1988, where the match really became secondary to the circus. So while there was crowds, there was no problem with crowds going to the training sessions, etc. But the players had to be, we really had to impress that this was a game. We were here to win the match. We'd scraped through every other match. We expected this is going to be a close game, and we would have to be at our best to be as disciplined as normal, take responsibility as normal, go to the ball as normal, not be afraid to make mistakes, so that was kind of the theme really of the preparation, getting into it. I was moving house as well at the time, which didn't make it any easier, but we met up on the Saturday, and we were it was quite relaxed, really. I had watched the match again on the Friday, and I was pretty sure how Tipperary would play. I had seen it 4 or 5 times that year. I knew we'd play to a certain standard. We wouldn't. The final wasn't going to phase them. They had learned a lot from the Munster final. The boys had learned a lot from the match against Joe Rabbit the previous year in the quarter final, where he had won a lot of ball. And I'll tell you an interesting story about that shortly. But I really didn't know how Galway were going to play. I didn't know how anyone could know how they were going to play. I mean, if they played really well and they played better than they had played in any of the other matches, well, then they probably beat us. But I don't know how anyone could know how they were going to play, really. And based on what I had seen against Kilkenny, I was pretty confident that if Tipperary played to the standard that I expected them to, that we would be right there. And that's as it turned out, really.
Yeah, like as you said, you travelled up on the Saturday. You got the train from Thurles. It was a big Thurles, but say on the Saturday evening and then Sunday morning and that, are you looking at little signs from players and how they're reacting and that? Like, there's obviously going to be nerves and things like that, but what way would you go about managing certain players?
That I think there's a switch for everybody, really. Do you know what I mean? That's the way it works. And so, some certain players are going to be more nervous than others. That's just the way it is. And there's not the same. There's no kind of one cap fits all, really, when it comes down to it. But I think in general, then there's a set of rules or principles or guiding principles for the team as a whole, which is, run as well, no more than the management, run by very strong personalities as well within the team. And like the team had, by that stage, had grown up together. The younger players had brought a lot to the table from 99, 2000. But you still had, Brendan Cummins was really experienced in goals. Tommy Dunn was really experienced run in midfield. He was captain. You had the likes of Eamon Corcoran, Paul Orman, David Kennedy. They were all, and Philip Maher. They were all kind of, Tom Costello. They were all kind of 99 players. They were all younger players, but they had, a lot of them had been on the 96 minor team that won the All Ireland. They were ready for the whole thing, as well as Brendan and Tommy. You had Brian O'Mara, who wasn't playing, and Johnny Lahey, who wasn't playing, but they were still important around the scene, around the panel. And like Declan was very important in the full forward line. But the rest of them really were, they were all mostly in their, like they were in their first All Ireland, really, all the rest of them. But I never felt there was any great nervousness about it. I think the team we had played a lot of matches to the same standard. And I think they all were fairly confident that we knew that as a team, as a panel, as players within the system, they knew what the system was. There was, the system sounds like this is something fairly special, but it's not. It wasn't that special, except that if you were in there, you had to work hard, you had to get a good first touch, you had to go to the ball, you had to take a chance, you had to put out your chest, you had to, you had to back, you had to play hard and strong, like a Tipperary defender. You didn't and not give away frees. And if you were anywhere else, you had to get a good first touch and you had to do the right thing with the ball. But they were, I think they all kind of, no more than I was myself or Jack Bergen or Ken, we'd seen it often enough in training, we'd seen it often enough in the matches. Kind of knew how we were going to play, to be honest with you. And if Galway were going to be superstars, well and good, they were going to beat us. But I hadn't seen that against Kilkenny. I was surprised that I felt that we had a really good chance, and I've a very good memory really of the morning of the match. Tipp, we stayed in Balls Bridge again, in juries, and everyone was quite relaxed. Really, there was no great pressure. There was just waiting for the match to come around. It was kind of a long day. We had the meal, we had everything, but they were ready for it really, and there wasn't going to. I was quite confident that the meeting of the president, the parade, the whole razzmatazz, the whole occasion was really going to be not make much difference to us really, and that's important, So I knew we were going to play as well as we could play, and as it turned out, that's the way it worked. And they needed to play as well as they played, but they had learned a lot. The previous year, Galway beat us in the quarter final, as you mentioned earlier on, in Croke Park, and Joe Rabbit won a huge amount of possession on the day, and he scored and was able to set up players. But when you look back on that match, if you ever look back on it again, well, my memory of it is that our guys, they all challenged very hard in the air, and Joe Rabbit won the ball. There was nobody left there to do anything. Then he could do anything he wanted. So in 2001, really, Joe Rabbit had an outstanding game against Kilkenny, and while he was wearing number 10, he was playing 13, and it wasn't rocket science to think that he was going to repeat the dose against Tipperary. So we were very sure that he was going to be playing right corner forward, even though wearing 10, and that's as it turned out. And he was going to be marking Paul Ormond, who was well ready for him, really. And we had spoken about not getting drawn into the first aerial challenge with Joe Rabbit, because he was going to catch the ball, but you had to be there for the second phase. And if Joe Rabbit caught it, well, there was a panic attack in 2000. There shouldn't be a panic attack in 2001. We had to be able to be ready there for the second phase. And ultimately, that was really the difference between 2000 and 2001. Tipperary, where Paul was and the other defenders, they were not on the ground while challenging in the air with Joe Rabbit. They were there for the second phase. And while I thought the referee was hard on Joe Rabbit actually in that All Ireland final, I thought he gave frees against him, which were maybe marginal for overcarrying, but that was because there was pressure there. And so that was full credit to intelligent players for learning from the previous year. And that was kind of the hallmark of that team. And I always remember saying to Paul Ormond, before the game at some stage, that not to be worried about Joe Rabbit catching the ball. And he said, no, I'll keep his hand down. And I misunderstood him. I said, oh, Paul, hold on a second. I told you not to be worried about him catching the ball. And he said, no, when he catches the ball, I'll keep his hand down, which meant that Joe Rabbit wasn't going to be able to get his arm over Paul Ormond's shoulder and maybe engineer a free from there. He was always going to be pushed back a little bit and then have to maybe come again. And when you see the tight margins that match was decided on. You know, there was 3 or 4 frees against Joe Rabbit, which were, you know, were probably as much as down to Paul Ormond as much to the referee, who was probably a little hard on Joe as well.
Yeah, because even looking at Paul Ormond that day, and I've looked at that game numerous times, and he was pulling and dragging out. He played him down to a tee, like, didn't he? He stayed niggling at him as well. A real old-style type cornerback, the way he performed that day. And even there was another occasion as well. Like Richie Murray started very well that day for Galway at centre field, and Paul Ormond was just completely wired, and he came through the centre. He was after winning the free, but Richie Murray was clean open, and Paul Ormond actually came out and connected with him with his shoulder, and Richie Murray went down winded. I don't think he hit the ball after that, but just by Paul hitting him late and getting away with his, he took one of their players out of the game.
Paul Ormond had a very nice smile to the referees. He was getting away with a lot more than he should have been probably at the time, but he was very powerful. He was really a very powerful man, Paul Ormond, physically very, very strong, very hard. And actually, when anyone that Paul Ormond hit, they knew they were hit by him. Yeah, he was very powerful.
Yeah, because looking at the rest of the game, I said, like, Tommy laid down the marker straight away for what was to come. That super score he got in the Cusack stand.
Yeah, that's that's probably my main memory of the match, really. I was right in line with that, but the sun was right behind the goals, over the Cusack stand. And as Tommy struck the ball, I could just hear the absolute perfection of the strike. I lost the ball when it went up in the air, but I said that has to be. I mean, I really didn't worry about where it was going because it was hit so well. I said that has to be over the bar, and sure enough, it was. I'll actually never forget the sound of it. I only heard the sound of the ball. I never saw the ball, but the sound of it was perfect. I only ever actually in the stand a few years ago. I think it might have been Waterford versus Kilkenny or Limerick versus Kilkenny. One of those 2 All Irelands. Henry Shefflin hit a ball from under the. He controlled the ball on his hurley and hit it from the Hogan stand side over the bar, and you could hear the perfection of the strike as well. And that just again reminded me of Tommy's one. It was just you know the sound is perfect. It's like being at the back of a driving range when professional golfers are hitting the ball. There's a sound that I'd never achieved playing golf, and very few can achieve it playing hurling either. But Tommy Dunn could, and it just set the tone for the day. He was perfect from 65s, and you know his delivery and his all-round performance really kind of capped the year for Tommy. You know, it was an outstanding display that day.
Yeah, because John Carter was hurling well at centre forward again, and I think it was Liam Hodgins centre back. He couldn't get on top of him at all. But then Declan Ryan showed his experience, then setting up Mark O'Leary for the first goal.
Yeah, Declan was improving all the time. You know, he was getting like all the time a little fitter, a little. You know, the injury in 2001 and the ankle really had kind of knocked him back a bit. But all the time he was coming, you know, from the league final all along, and he was just Declan is an absolutely superb player, really. You know, one of the greats of all times for Tipp, really. And it was lovely to see him winning. You know, that day, like with a whole new team again. You know, three All Irelands in 3 different decades is some achievement. And you know, it's different. Like All Ireland finals, then Mark O'Leary pops up, and you know, I can always remember when Mark scored a point in the second half from over on the sideline near Hill 16, and I was right in line with that. I said, "Don't go for that, Mark," in my own mind, and I said that ball needs to come back across. And then there was only one place, of course, Mark was going to go for. That was it. And when I saw it going over the bar, I said, "This must be our day anyway. That has to be." And you know, that was. Even though Galway always were able to, you know, they were able to put us under pressure, they got the goal. But every time Galway got Tipp under pressure that day, I felt Tipp responded, and Mark got a point, or someone else was able to get a quick score down the other end, John Carroll or whatever. and they were always able to get ourselves back on the front foot as well. And, you know, even though, you know, we were having trouble in defence, David Kennedy was under a bit of pressure, Paul Kelly was under pressure. You know, we weren't as solid in defence, really, I'd say, that day as we were in all the matches to that year, but to that point. But there was know-how there at that stage. They ultimately knew how to win. The players that came in, you know, ultimately Paddy O'Brien came in, did well. Micheál Ryan from Tipperary came in, did very well. Conor Gleeson came in. You know, like I think Tipp used, possibly, did we use 5 subs that day? It had just come in, and that was a help to us in 2001 to be able to use 5 subs, you know, because, you know, we had players that we needed to use. The system that we were playing, or not the system, it wasn't the system as such, but the way we were playing required a lot of physical effort. So if you had players to come on, we weren't afraid to put them on. And I think we were the first team to actually use 5 subs in an All-Ireland hurling final, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah, like Mark O'Leary gets the goal at the start of the second half. They always say it's always the last person you expect will pop up in the All-Ireland. But if you look at Mark's stats that year, he scored 2 against Clare, 3 in the Munster final, 4 the first day against Wexford, and 2 in the replay against Wexford. So it wasn't as if he wasn't putting up scores.
No, Mark was outstanding player. Actually, the first day I saw Mark playing was in an under-21 match in, I'd say it's probably 99, in Cork. They were well beaten by Cork. And Mark was a centre forward, and very interesting for me the way he played. But I thought of him more as a kind of a John Carroll type player in the centre forward role, as being as a scorer. You know, I didn't see him as that. But then when he came into the panel, you know, he was more of a scorer than I expected, and you know, a class player and beautiful striker of the ball. You know, he did his job. He was able to work up and down the line as a wing forward, and then he had obviously the advantage of being able to score as well. And you know, that was an improvement in that team as they went on from 99, 2000 to 2001. They were scoring became easier. They used the ball better. They didn't waste as much chances as they had in the Munster final in 2000. If you take the opposite, they'd learn from that, and you know, that was nice to see, really, that you know, that you know, you see a team developing. They were learning on the job, really. They didn't have a lot of experience. There was a lot of new players brought into that team in '99. They had to learn. They learned on the job, and there was a lot of intelligence in that team, a lot of grey matter, and you know, they put that to good use.
Yeah, like after Mark got the second goal, Declan Ryan got a point straight away, and I remember saying to the lads that were with me, just we got another goal here now, and it'll finish it off. Surely we have it. And one of the lads says, "Jesus, you're not looking for much, are you?" But lo and behold, Declan had the goal chance straight after, and missed it, and would surely have finished it off early at that stage. But Galway stayed plugging away. Broderick was all over the place that day. You just couldn't keep tabs on him.
Yeah, see, that wasn't the way that team did it, really, in fairness. Easy victories weren't really on their menu. Yeah, I remember Declan's miss, all right. Maybe it might have, but who knows. But yeah, certainly Galway looked dangerous then, Broderick. And I mean, he had ultimately the great chance going through that Brendan Cummins made, like, you know, that's an All-Ireland winning save, really. Do you know what I mean? When it comes down to it, you know, Brendan, like, he was a superb, you know, kind of ahead of his time, really, as keeper. The way he could spread himself, his puck out. You know, he was grabbing the ball over the bar, you know, easily at his ease. You know, when no one else was doing that. And but that was, you know, he made plenty of superb saves before and afterwards. But you know, that on that particular day, that was a serious save, really, to pull that one out of the bag.
Yeah, because like as Galway were coming back and they were getting on top, but Larry started coming more into the game too, and he got 2 points in between that. And obviously 10 minutes to go, Fergal Healy gets the goal, and Paul Kelly and Tomas Costello gone off injured at that stage, so you were under pressure.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah. But we were always able to find a point or two. Do you know what I mean? As you say, Larry was able to pop up, and Larry was doing a lot of hooking and blocking as well. And John Carroll was hooking and blocking, and like we weren't making it easy for God. We weren't getting it easy, but at the same time, we just weren't as solid in defence. We had a couple of injuries, we lost our shape a bit. Ultimately we finished off with probably 3 subs in defence at least. Anyway, I'd say Micheál Ryan, probably Donncha Fahy was there, Conor Gleeson was there. So like we like, but all of them in their own right, like all of them played in 2002. Really, do you know what I mean? They were all very good players, and Micheál Ryan really has. Micheál Ryan really didn't actually, through injury and various. Micheál Ryan didn't just become the player that I thought he might. Like, Micheál Ryan was an outstanding player, and really he had a big impact on that game when he went on. He's strong, for not a huge physically big man, but he was very strong physically, well put on the ground. He had great touch, and he was a great reader of the play. And Conor Gleeson did well when they went on to another huge man. And Donncha Fahy was near enough, very close to the team. It was toss up between himself and Tom Costello at any stage, really. Donncha Fahy was never going to let you down. So and he had a point to prove. So, but still at the same time, they weren't just. It wasn't just a normal. It wasn't the normal 6 there, really. So there was certain amount of pressure finishing up. But you know what? I just always thought we were going to win it. I'd say the only time I got worried was kind of the last couple of minutes that they'd get a goal out of the blue. And I always remember, I know you might have Eamon Corcoran on this podcast, but when Eamon Corcoran's first touch let him down for the last ball that went out over the sideline, that really did for me and my nerves anyway. I can tell you that much. If I was anywhere close to him, I'd have hit him with anything I'd have had in my bottle of water or anything I'd have had in my hand.
Eamon often says that it's probably his worst game that he ever played for Tipp. I'm only going about Eamon, but Eamon Corcoran is probably one of Tipp's best ever wing backs, it's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, I don't remember him. I actually don't remember him playing a batch at all, to be honest with you. I wouldn't go along with him there, but I certainly would when maybe he's just too much thinking about the last ball. When the last ball, when he's touched, just let him down. It was just nerves, that was all. And but if the line ball, I often told him afterwards, Eamon, I'd have killed you if that line ball had caused the goal.
Yeah, because the final whistle, Nicky, the satisfaction between winning as a player and winning as a manager are completely different, I assume.
Yeah, I think completely different. Yeah, I think for sure. Yeah, like winning as a player, like it's fantastic, to be honest, because you're with your own age group really, and ultimately, when you're meeting up, if I'm meeting up with a group of players, I'm more likely to be meeting the lads from 89 and 91 than I am ever to be meeting the lads from 2001. That's just the way of the world. But it's when you're in a managerial role, there's great satisfaction as well, really. When you look back on it, there's great satisfaction. There's no such thing as an easy All Ireland, really. They all have to be won, and that was it was a great relief in some ways, because when you go in to do something, I suppose I didn't really know what I didn't. Who knows? There was no great expectation that we were going to win the All Ireland in 1999. I always thought if we got out of Clare in 1999, we could really have rattled it. We had an outstanding spirit in the team. We trained unbelievably hard. The likes of Liam Sheedy, the likes of Kennedy coming on to it. You had Tommy Dunn, Declan, Johnny, Leahy. They were all really at their prime. And Conal Bonner was still there. you know, there was a lot of experience and a lot of those young players coming in as well. And you know, like that was a regret really. I thought if we just got out of Cork that first day that year, but then you know you have to take a step back then from there and kind of reform the team and redevelop everything and start from scratch. And you know, I had made mistakes in '99 leaving off Declan, which was, you know, at the time it sounded tactically very smart, but in hindsight it was like it just didn't work. That was it. But you know, 2000 we had to take a step back, bring in more younger players, and then in 2001 do the same again. Really, you know, we were lucky to find the likes of Owen Kelly, the likes of John O'Brien, the likes of Larry, particularly coming through in because we needed pace, we needed more scoring threat than we had in '99 or 2000, and ultimately those younger players provided it for Tipp in 2001, but for many years afterwards, you know, and you know, Larry ended up scoring 3 goals in an All Ireland final in 2010 just to, you know, prove what an outstanding player that he was potentially in 2001.
Yeah, and obviously Owen Kelly, like I've had this conversation with Eamon a few times, and obviously Eamon Corcoran has won Fitzgibbon Cups with Henry Shefflin, and well, I asked him about the greatest hurler he's ever played with, and without even blinking, he says Owen Kelly. And that if Owen had half the medals that Henry has, he'd be up there on the same pedestal as him, I suppose. But obviously in Tipp, we recognise what player that we did have over them 14, 15 years that he was putting on the blue and gold jersey.
Oh yeah, no, it's an absolutely outstanding player. I mean, like from the first, I mean, he could have played in goals as well, by the way. You know, I mean, that's just how good a player he was for Tipp. Like he could have, if anything had to happen to Brendan Cummins in 2000, and it nearly did, Owen Kelly would have been in goals. You know, so it would have been just he was a remarkable player. Like he could have played, and his brother Paul as well, an outstanding player. But Owen was just, yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue with 10 All Ireland medals for Henry Shefflin to be the greatest player of all times. But Owen Kelly really was a absolutely outstanding hurler. He had it everywhere. He had strength, anticipation, just an unbelievable touch, and then you know, right or left, power in the shot, just great eye for goal. You know, he had everything really, and a great determination and desire. You know, I'm not sure. You know, he's still doing it from Mullinahone. You know, they won the Club B, their club championship, didn't they, this year? And Owen was playing as well as ever. So yeah, great player.
Yeah, I suppose just touching on 2002, I suppose your last year, everything seemed to be flying before that Munster final. None of us seen that coming. That defeat against Waterford, and I know it's probably not fair to ask you because you'd given 4 years and you probably couldn't give anything more after that. But that defeat against Waterford, did that defeat set Tipp back maybe 3 or 4 years? It took him a long time to recover.
You know what? I think we played really well in the All Ireland semi-final. Actually, I think the defeat in the Munster final in some ways was a little bit of a help. Kind of, you know, we were champ. You see, you have that, and it's been there since. It was there before. You know, Tipp are not the best champions really. There's just that edge goes off us a little bit, and then, you know, in that 2002 campaign, we were missing players. Many of them who were all stars. Other players came in, did unbelievably well against Limerick and against Clare in the semi-final, and by far the best A versus B match I ever saw in Thurles in my time, either as a player or as a manager, was played on the Saturday week before Tipperary played Waterford in the Munster final. It was just an unbelievable match. I remember Michael O'Brien, who was county secretary then at the time, he said, that's unbelievable. He said, we have to win. But actually, in hindsight, the players' ambition was to get on the team. Once you get on the team, there was a kind of a relaxation because everyone had expected they were going to beat Waterford. And I always remember Liam Devaney, the Lord of Mercy, came in to say a few words, because Tipp had been beaten in 1963. Was it? No, I could get the year wrong, but back around that time, and Liam Devaney very, very well described how Tipperary had walked into a haymaker in a Munster final in the early 60s, where nobody gave Waterford a chance, and the Waterford ultimately beat them. And our players are listening to that, and having played an unbelievable trial match on the Saturday night previously, just they walked. In some ways, I think there was a bit of overconfidence, really, to be honest with you. It's the only way I could describe. I don't think there was anything else. And then Waterford on the day, like Waterford were good and actually were on the points of getting better, and they just beat us easily. But we got a good draw. We got back in against Offaly, which was important just to get the wheels back on the bus. And I thought against Kilkenny, I thought in 2002 we had a great chance, really. And I thought that was one of the best matches. That was one of the best matches I'd seen for a few years. It was unbelievable high fielding in it. Great scores. We had several chances in the first half, really, to score goals. We had them really. Owen Kelly had Phil Larkin in all kinds of trouble. Eugene had the better of Noel Hickey. But really, we didn't score what we should have scored. And ultimately, it came down to the wire. And probably DJ Carey, created the goal chance for your man Coogan. And there was very little in it, really. And it was a very disappointing defeat, because I think if we had got there, if we got over that, I think we were going to win the final. I'll be honest. I wouldn't have had. I think we were capable of beating Clare again. I don't think Clare were as good in 2002 as they were in 2001. But there was, at the same time, I don't think Tipperary had the same. I don't know how to describe it. I don't think we had the same wherewithal, the same. Desire is too hard a word, but I don't think we had the same absolute fire wasn't in the bellies that was in it in 2001. And ultimately that was the first tight match that they really had lost. And you know what I mean? And so some of it was down to Kilkenny being very good on the day. But I think a bit of it was as well that Tipperary were champions and had the typical Tipperary softness as champions.
Yeah, well, obviously 2001 is a year that we won't forget. Just touching on 91, I know that we had it on the show there last week with Ken and Pat and Connell. Some great memories there. I know you were riddled with injuries a bit that year, but you were still involved in some of the greatest games of hurling that were ever played that year.
It was. That was a year really that we had to win, because having lost in 1990, there was just massive desire from the word go really to win it. And, we kind of plain sailing really in the first match against Limerick, but like the Munster finals against Cork were just, I still think the Munster final replay victory against Cork was the most remarkable Tipperary victory I ever saw. Now I was injured on the day, but I still, that was just incredible to come from the position where the team came from, with the goals by Pat and Aidan Ryan, just incredible stuff. And, the crowd on the field, it's just, the stuff that you'd never forget really. And then, ultimately, by the time we got to the All Ireland final, we were kind of running on empty a bit. Brendan, Cormac Bonner and myself were quite seriously injured, really, going on to that match. And Babs took a big chance in playing us. And look, I suppose lucky for his perspective and for us all, it worked out in the end. But I suppose really as a manager, I'm not sure I'd have made the same decision that he did.
I suppose it would have been easier to start you than bring you on, and you'd be gone after 5 minutes.
Yeah, there was no bringing us on really. I suppose that was the reality of it. There was no. I had a certain pace that I could only go at, and for a certain amount of time. And if I ever had to pass that speed limit, it was over. And sure enough, that's what's going to happen when a ball breaks. You're going to ultimately, if your hamstring is gone, you've no really business playing hurling at that level, you know. So, but we were lucky to get away with it, and Cormac's calf was completely shot as well. So it was a one-man band in the full forward line, but in fairness, the one-man band was a fairly special one, and Pat did some job. And I always remember the night before we had a team meeting, and Pat, you know, everyone knew that we had injuries, and Pat said, "Look, I'll tell you what, let's just give it into me. I'll do the rest." And sure enough, he was true to his word. He surely did.
Yeah, because like as the boys were telling us there last week, even with Declan Carr being captain that year, and even knowing Declan down through the years, and he seems to come across as a quiet man, talking to him outside of a hurling field, but he stood up after the league semi-final and gave an unbelievable speech, and you really had a leader after that.
I know Carr was an outstanding player and an outstanding man. Yeah, great captain. And actually, you know, if like Declan Carr had a very important role actually in the formation of that 2001 team, because he was on Declan. I brought Declan back into the panel in 1999, and he trained like an absolute savage, and he led those young players, showed them really what the ropes were in terms of training, in terms of looking after yourself, in terms of just commitment to the cause. And you know, he played in the league final, and you know, Conor Gleeson came in then and played against Kerry, and probably, you know, it was a toss up really, and I should have brought on Declan Carr for the last 10-15 minutes in the match against Clare in 1999, or actually started him probably and brought on Conor Gleeson for the last 20 minutes. But that was probably another one of my mistakes along the way. But Declan Carr had a big influence on a lot of those young fellas, you know, that started off, you know, the Costellos, the Philip Mars, Donica Fahy, Ormond, Eamon, Kennedy, Paul Kelly might have been there the year before, Eddie Enright coming back in. They all started in 1999, and Declan Carr was a very important man, very important team player, played in the league final, and probably should have played in the Munster Championship other than for my error.
Nicky, it's been an absolute pleasure going down memory lane with you, and we've really enjoyed it. And thanks very much for coming on to the show. We hope to talk to you again soon.
Great, Thomas. Yeah, thanks very much, and enjoy the chats with the rest of the lads. So
that's Nicky English's view there. Sean, some super stories again.
Yeah, they were great stories, and they're good for me considering I was only 1 year old at the time. It's just stories that I've never have heard of. Yeah, like you could see how he was a hero to so many Tipp fans, that just the way he went around and conducted himself as manager, like, and it's just interesting to hear from between 89, just like what he was like between 89 and his hurling career, and then moving on to play or managing career then. But yeah, there's just a few great stories.
Yeah, and obviously you would have heard against him yourself, John Carroll, and Nicky saying there how the big movement and win of the All Ireland was bringing John Carroll to centre forward after he'd been an All-Star wing back the year before.
Yeah, absolutely. It just shows the intelligence of Nicky, that he knew to move John from wing back to centre forward. It really helped Tipp win the All Ireland that year, and it just great management, and then John then to adapt to it. So yeah, it is just one of like a great move that led Tipp to an All Ireland win, you could say.
Well, that's it for another week. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Nicky as much as we did. There really was some great stories told by him, and it most definitely does jog the memory. I'm delighted to tell you that coming up in the show next week, we're going to have the players' view from 2001, as Tommy Dunn and Brendan Cummins will be joining us to recall their memories on that great year. It's definitely a show you won't want to miss. Thanks to Nicky for joining us, and to Jonathan Cullen for being with us as well. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to share the show with all your family and friends. Good luck, take care, and we'll see you all next week.